Hey, everybody. Well, we've got a fun prophetic decode, I believe, this morning. It's fun for me because we got the Washington football team involved. I've been a lifelong fan, suffering many years over the last 25 plus, as they've been mired in mediocrity and terribleness in general. So, anyway, if you follow football, you might have already seen the news that they beat the Steelers, who were undefeated previously. And Pittsburgh has been actually a great football team for many years. They've won, I think they're tied for the most championships, whereas Washington hasn't really done much of anything since I was 14 years old. But anyway, and this was one of the best start ever for Pittsburgh. And so I watched the game. I always, watch the formerly known as Redskins with a little bit of trepidation because they usually find a way to mess things up, or maybe I'm just super negative when it comes to sports. That's what Jenny would say. So anyway, as you can see, the score here, it did not start out well with them in the first half. They got 3 points to the end, but they were down 14-0 early, and then you can see at the end of the game is where they really came back. And I think that's going to be significant in how this whole story is playing out. So I watched the game. I don't really think about it beyond the fact that it was kind of fun that um, they beat this undefeated team, and they're still in the running to, despite having a losing record right now, they can still potentially win their division. So all that being said, this morning when I woke up during my prayer time, I was like, you know what? I want to read an article, which didn't seem super spiritual to me, about the game. And I went specifically to find the beat reporter from ESPN that writes about it. And so this is what I saw as I read that article in the middle of my prayer time. The Washington football team crafted one of its best comeback win in years, led by a man who knows all about comebacks. Quarterback Alex Smith, whose career appeared over 2 years ago because of gruesome leg injury, helped rally Washington to a stunning 23-17 victory over the previously unbeaten Pittsburgh Steelers. Trailing 14-0 in the first half and showing little to no life offensively, Washington stormed back in the second half. That's when all of a sudden I was like, they beat the Steelers. All right, so, and this is all related to, I believe, a prophetic picture of what's happening in Washington and then the election and all that. So, as I said here, I believe God encoded a fun message in a historic win last night in the NFL. It's a little picture of how the election will resolve. So, with that being said, the historic win was one of the things was it was the second biggest lead that the Steelers lost in their history. And so they were up 14-0, and that only one other time they had more points than that, and they end up, even though they were winning by a certain amount, they end up losing. So I'll just read this because I think it does a good job of basically telling the story of what I think is being said here. So as it relates to election, Steelers represent those who are trying to steal the election, right? They come in undefeated with a formidable history of winning. It looks like they have control of the competition. And then Washington comes to life in the second half, and Alex Smith leads one of the best comebacks in Washington history. So Alex Smith, comes from Alexander, which means defender of the people, leads a team to win amidst his own unbelievable comeback from a horrific injury that nearly cost his life. So the Trump parallel is evident because I think he is the defender of the people. In this case, he's been pictured that way in many, many different times with people in the prophetic realm as well. And he's also going to lead a historic comeback for Washington and the nation. So, of course, there's a play on words there, right? Stealer. Of course, we don't use that term, stealer. It's a thief, right? But it's a play on words, and God is super into puns, if you haven't noticed. The final score, 23-17 equals 40, which highlights the testing that our country has been through, in particular this year. Proverbs 23:17 Don't let your heart envy sinners, but be zealous for the fear of the Lord all the day. I feel like that scripture is kind of just saying, like, no matter what's going on with people that are aligned with the enemy or those that seem to be getting away with stealing things, don't be envious. Don't worry about what's going on with them. Often we've seen David kind of cry out to the Lord in his Psalms about, the unrighteous, the evil are getting away with it. But eventually he always gets back to be zealous for the fear of the Lord all day. So God's ultimately the main authority in the whole universe for all time and for all purposes. And so his things are going to play out no matter what looks like is happening in the world today. So just a little backstory. I have often said that the Washington football team, formerly known as the Redskins, is a picture of the dysfunction of Washington, D.C. itself. So they've been a poorly run professional franchise for the last 25 years. And I know this could have been, I've been a fan my whole life. And like I said, it's a reflection of the dysfunction and what's going on in D.C. The glory of the days of the Redskins were during the Reagan and Bush administrations. But after winning their last Super Bowl in '91, they've just struggled to compete for any playoff. Like, the playoffs are few and far between. They've never been in the running for a championship. But since Trump took office, I think some things have begun to shift in D.C. There have been a string of champions from the city. In the last 4 years, the Mystics, Capitals, and Nationals have won in the WNBA, MLB, and NHA titles, respectively. And I don't think there'd been any championships at all in professional sports in DC since like the mid '90s, when I think the MLS, there was I think the MLS team, which it's escaping their name escaping me right now. They won maybe 2 or 3 times, like in the early years of the league. So I've been saying for a year or so that I believe that, and there's a good chance that the Skins, or the football team, will come back in the next 4 years and win a championship. So I won't be surprised if that happens, just as a kind of prophetic picture of what's going on with the rebuilding of DC and the things that have been cleaned out. So despite an attempt to reset the culture at the Washington football team with the hiring of the respected coach Ron Rivera, the dysfunction of the team reached a fevered pitch this offseason. The team name was changed because of racial issues. There was a large sexual harassment problem that was uncovered and reported in the Washington Post about the front office personnel doing things they shouldn't have been doing, and other things as well. And then even Coach Rivera was diagnosed with cancer. So it's just like, if something was going to go wrong, it happened for this past off season. So they won the first game of the year, and it was actually against Philadelphia, which I think is also significant, because you have 2 things. They beat first game of the year. They were behind. They came back and won in Philadelphia. Obviously, Philadelphia is a key city in what's happening in the election. And Pittsburgh is also, a key city in Pennsylvania being a swing state. And both of those games they were behind significantly, and they came back to win eventually. But they won that first game, and then it just kind of fell apart again. Their quarterback, Dwayne Haskins, wasn't working out. He got benched, and then Kyle Allen came in. He got injured right away, and then Smith comes back from over 600, almost 700 days of being injured from that bad leg injury, and he didn't get to win that first game he was in. But since the time he's been the starter, the team is now 3-1. So anyway, I feel like this is just a little bit of a picture of what's going on in DC and what God's called Trump to do to clean out things. And sometimes we see these parallels, like we've been saying, that happen in the natural world. God uses him to speak about what he's doing in other areas of, whether it's spiritually or it's a combination of spiritually, naturally, and what's going on in government, what Trump's called to do. And I believe he is a defender of the people that God has raised up for this time. And just like Alex Smith who's taken a beating and was decommissioned. Like, I think Trump has been injured in many ways because of what the enemies tried to do to unseat him. But in the end, he's going to come back with a big victory. And so just stay tuned. Keep your eyes peeled for other interesting word plays, like Washington overcoming those that are trying to steal stuff. Anyway, have a good one. Thanks for tuning in.